Mrs. Pooler closed the front door behind her, put a bag of groceries on a low bedside table, and listened with pleasure to the peaceful silence that reigned around. How nice it is to return after work to an empty apartment and devote a few hours only to your beloved. The day before yesterday, my daughter cooked with her grandmother was sent to rest in Turkey, let the girls bask in the sun in the middle of winter. The husband went straight from work to visit his parents and will stay with them for the night. Mrs. Pooler knew how to appreciate the rare moments of loneliness, turning them into a small celebration of a melted diet. Cheese slices, salted red fish, grapes, berries, a bottle of good wine, and, of course, a bucket of pistachio ice cream. Mrs. Pooler laid out the food on the table and solved the most difficult task in her mind, to cook a light dinner or just boil a bag of king prawns and drink this food of the gods with a glass of light beer. Deep thoughts were interrupted by a phone call. Looking at the screen of the mobile phone, Veronica grimaced. When will Katrina realize that everyone around her was tired of her importunity? Hi, am I distracting? Katrina did not wait for an answer. Listen, I wanted to ask everything, but after the divorce, your darling found someone for herself? Katrin, she got divorced only 2 months ago, and you are already hunting for another gossip. Sharply laid siege Mrs. Pooler, curious gossip. Well, yes, of course, but are you okay with Mr. Pooler? I hope. In the voice of a friend, sympathetic notes were heard. Don't wait, Nick chuckled. I'm sorry, I just came home from work, I'm tired insanely. Of course. Katrina's voice became insinuating. Thank God you are doing well, otherwise I saw them together yesterday, so I could not sleep all night. Who did you see? Didn't understand. You're Mr. Pooler and Polly, the girlfriend exclaimed triumphantly and hurried up. You know, Polly and I work in the same building, only in different offices. Yesterday I was going to have lunch in a cafe, I went out, and Polly was walking ahead. I called out to her, but she didn't even hear. She jumped to the car, sat down on the seat, and after all, only she was seen. Moreover, Katrina blurted out your car, gasping with happiness. I immediately recognized her. The colors were conspicuous, plum, and as soon as I saw Mr. Pooler at the wheel, I instantly saw that something was wrong. My husband took my best friend to the dentist yesterday. It is a crime? There was silence on the phone, then Katrina sighed strangely, as if grunting, and agreed with regret. No, what a crime it is when close people help each other. Thank you, Lord, otherwise I inadvertently thought that a divorcee had taken away a good man from her closest friend. Thank you for your vigilance. Mrs. Pooler quickly turned off the conversation and was finally able to breathe. What's happening? Of course, she couldn't let Karina gloat, so she lied about the dentist. But a fact is a fact. Mr. Pooler, secretly from his wife, met with her friend, practically a sister. The main thing is to calm down. About the destructive power of jealousy, Mrs. Pooler knew firsthand. The first years of marriage, she constantly suspected Mr. Pooler of infidelity. As soon as he glanced in the direction of another woman for a second, Veronica instantly began to go crazy. Once in a restaurant and at the birthday party of a friend, the same Mrs. Rose, it seemed to Mrs. Pooler that her husband was looking too tenderly at an unfamiliar beauty. Alcohol played its role, and Mrs. Pooler, in a prophetic whisper, gave her husband a scandal. Then she ran off to cry in the corridor. The birthday girl rushed after her. The guests followed the birthday girl. They calmed the sufferer with the whole world. It's even disgusting to remember. She will remember that evening for a long time. When they returned home, Mr. Pooler did not shout and swear, or threaten with a divorce. He spoke calmly and firmly. I've almost come to terms with the fact that you never learned to trust me, but why ruin the lives of strangers? This is a holiday for you and your close friend, and instead of congratulating Polly, the guests were forced to comfort you. Also me from the body and bows. I'm tired of your stupid jealousy, so you put on such performances for the last time. I didn't want to somehow justify myself, but as soon as I looked at my husband, I immediately bit my tongue. The good-natured Mr. Pooler was definitely replaced. A stranger was looking at her with a tired, faded look. Mrs. Pooler felt so ashamed that she vowed never to upset the man she loved with baseless suspicions. To be honest, Mr. Pooler never gave her a real reason for jealousy. He did not hide the phone from his wife, did not hide the passwords from the laptop and computer. They lived for 2 years like in a fairy tale, and then the evil witch came and smashed the crystal palace of trust in one fell swoop. Mrs. Pooler felt a bitter lump accustomed to her throat. She grabbed her cell phone with a trembling hand and dialed her mother-in-law's number. "Mrs. Gurins, good evening." "Thank you, everything is fine with the Varenka." "Is Mr. Pooler far away?" "I can't call him." "Maybe the phone is dead?" "Hello," a calm voice of her husband rang out in the receiver a minute later. "Everything is fine with my device." "What's happened?" "Nothing, I just missed you a lot," Veronica cooed softly. "Seriously?" Mr. Pooler laughed in disbelief. "And I thought that this terrible smell of your marine reptiles is spreading throughout our apartment." "No." "Are you okay, sunshine? Do you want me to come?" From the gentle, slightly mocking voice of her husband, the heart became cozy and warm. No, stay with your parents. My mother says hello from me." "I wanted to chat with Polly here, but for the 3rd day I can't get through to her. I'm worried maybe something happened." "Yes, everything is in order with your Polly," Mr. Pooler said carelessly. "I saw yesterday. She asked to see the apartment that she inherited from her grandmother." "For what?" Wife asked stupidly. "What do you mean, why?" Mr. Pooler was genuinely surprised. "Assess the situation, determine the scope of work, calculate the cost of repairs, but my company will have to do all this, and then you also get a discount for your girlfriend." Mr. Pooler began to tell the details. The discussion of someone else's repair had never seemed so exciting to Veronica, but after a conversation with her husband, Veronica immediately rushed to call Polly. "Let's check it out, gentlemen." "Hi, dear, something from you has not been heard for 3 days." "Hi, and I was just about to call you," my friend was delighted. "I sent Mr. Bankos for the weekend to my ex-husband and I already miss it, can you imagine? You do not know how to receive joy from the long-awaited freedom." "I am also alone," Mr. Pooler went to his parents. Polly did not react in any way to this message from her friend. We chatted a little and Mrs. Pooler cautiously began a secret interrogation. "I keep forgetting to ask, are you going to sell your grandmother's apartment or rent it out to tenants?" "Rent, of course, why sell? Mr. Bankos will grow up, get married, and there is already an apartment in a good area, only I won't let anyone in before spring. I need to bring housing into a decent look." "Your Mr. Pooler appreciated everything yesterday. Repairs will cost a pretty penny." "Did you meet with Mr. Pooler yesterday?" Nick was surprised. "And he didn't tell you?" "Probably thought I had already reported." "That's something you were in no hurry with the report," Mrs. Pooler thought. "Mrs. Rubinson visited me today, not realizing the torment of her friend," Polly continued. "She taught me how to bake such a cake. The taste is fabulous. Will you write down the recipe?" "Tell me, I'll remember." Mrs. Pooler got interested. After chatting with a friend, completely calmed down, she hurried to Mr. Pooler's office to write down the original recipe. Having prepared a sheet of paper, she rummaged through the desk for a long time in search of a pen. In one of the drawers, she noticed a small branded package from a jewelry store. "What is this?" Mrs. Pooler took out a white velvet box from the bag. "Gold earrings with green stone. What a charm." True, she did not really like colored stones, but does it really matter? Veronica instantly fell in love with the elegant decoration. Mr. Pooler is a great conspirator. That's why he met with Polly. Probably wanted to consult about a gift. Rebus made up his mind and, burning with impatience, Veronica hurried to the fitting by standing at the mirror. Catching the light, the stone sparkled. "Is it really a real emerald?" "Mr. Pooler has gone crazy. Why spend such money without any reason?" "By the way, there really is no reason. The New Year holidays have recently ended, until March 8th is far away. Maybe he decided to please his wife on Valentine's Day? No, she can't wait until February. Or maybe it's not for me. Nick thought jokingly, again hiding the box with the earrings in the bag. As in one movie, the wife was happy with a gift she accidentally found, and it was intended for her mistress. What was the name of this movie? Real Love, it seems. A beautiful romantic movie. Now I'll take a look at it. Veronica, fluttering like a butterfly, hurried to the kitchen to prepare herself a light supper with a glass of wine. The next day, Mr. Pooler returned home with gifts from his parents. Cherry jam and currant jam from the mother-in-law pleased Mrs. Pooler. From the very morning she was in a wonderful mood. Saturday, you don't have to go to work, the soul sings. She opened the window and delicious frosty air rushed into the room. Outside the window is a dazzling winter day. Veronica started a general cleaning. She was inspired to scrub the stove, sink, bath. Mr. Pooler, infected by his wife's enthusiasm, also grabbed a rag, then a vacuum cleaner. For hands quickly brought shine to the whole apartment, the husband had lunch with an appetite and left to meet with a potential customer. Mrs. Pooler felt a slight disappointment. She did not wait for a hint or a mysterious look from Mr. Pooler. How is it, although who will arrange surprises in broad daylight, especially after washing the toilet? Veronica decided to fuss herself and cook a couple of gourmet dishes for dinner, looking forward to a magical evening. The woman hummed a song. So I want to brag to someone, send a photo of earrings to my friends. Not. Mrs. Pooler flew into the office, noisily pulled out a drawer. Some damn thing. There was neither a beautiful branded package, nor earrings with a green stone, nor a box with velvet. Nothing. The sun immediately faded outside the window. Veronica sank down on the carpet without strength. She had nothing to breathe, as if someone's hard hand grabbed her by the throat. The lock clicked. Mr. Pooler returned. Calm down. Mrs. Pooler persuaded herself. You've already made so many mistakes in the heat of the moment. We need to figure everything out. The woman got up from the floor and went to feed her husband delicious dishes. At dinner, tension hung in the air, in which Mrs. Pooler knitted like in a swamp, but Mr. Pooler seemed not to notice at all either the gloomy atmosphere that reigned around or his wife's changed mood. He enthusiastically asked for what reason the table was set so beautifully and, without waiting for an answer, began to enthusiastically tell what profitable order he managed to get. Mrs. Pooler was slightly nauseous with excitement. She hardly swallowed a couple of spoons of salad. Her head resembled an abandoned attic with broken windows. Thoughts, one worse than the other, randomly climbed from everywhere. Mr. Pooler was not at any meeting. He went to his mistress. We need to call Mrs. Rose. Maybe she noticed something suspicious the day before yesterday. Who are you going to call, fool? Maybe he poly your precious and dragged earrings. What to do, how to ask? She looked straight at her husband. Such an attractive and such an alien face. Mr. Pooler caught her eye and smiled warmly. The sun, the fish is fantastic. This client is a real gold mine. There is not a house, but a whole mansion. The company will receive a lot of money for repairs. By the way, we can change your clunker for a decent car. Do we have anything for tea? What? Like waking up from a dream. For tea? That's strawberries with cream, and now serve pastries. I'm sorry I didn't have time to bake the buns for dinner. I actually meant a banal cookie or a cupcake from the store, Mr. Pooler said in surprise and could not resist. You might think you bake for days. By the way, I also work, said the wife, or are you implying that I don't know how to manage the dough? What about cinnamon pretzels? I have already forgotten the taste of them, Mr. Pooler laughed amiably. Did I ever make you hang around the stove? I know very well how you sew up with the lessons, it can be seen, even if I'm a bad housewife, but you haven't gone far either. What do you want to say? Where's my heart? Silently yelled, and Mrs. Pooler uttered completely different words by ear. For the second month in Varia's room you can't hang a shelf. I would have called the master long ago. The offended husband grumbled in response, I don't have a drill. I'll buy a drill and hang your shelf. Words, Veronica dismissed. By the way, who said that? This is from some movie. Mr. Pooler was taken aback by surprise. Alas, neither the Terminator nor the Spider-Man said such a thing. Are you taking me for an idiot? My husband got really angry. Come on, sunshine. Mr. Pooler jumped out from behind the table. The knife darted into the hallway, tore off his winter jacket from the hanger, and flew out of the apartment like a bullet, slamming the door deafeningly. I went myself. Mrs. Pooler belatedly shouted back and burst into tears. In tears, she rushed to call her mother in Turkey. He really was at a business meeting, my daughter Mrs. Gurens reassured. Varya and I just at that time called him via video link, don't even doubt it. Ma, you always protect your adored Mr. Pooler, but where did he take the earrings? I'm telling you, the decoration has disappeared. Veronica was indignant. Why did you have to take it? Mom was unimpressed. Just moved it to a safe place. Sorry, dear, but you stick your nose too often where it doesn't belong, and Mr. Pooler is well aware of this. Why didn't you present earrings at dinner then? The grown daughter sobbed. You yourself said that there is no reason for a gift. Maybe he had already prepared a surprise for Valentine's Day in advance. Free money appeared, so he bought it. You either ask your husband a direct question or stop torturing yourself. That's really jealousy is a monster with green eyes. That's it, don't fool me, Mrs. Pooler. By the time Mr. Pooler returned home, his wife had finally calmed down. Now she was eaten by a burning sense of guilt. Veronica. I decided to bake cinnamon pretzels as an apology. Mr. Pooler entered the kitchen and laid a heavy, massive box on the table. It's a drill for the money I spent on it. You could call a dozen craftsmen. I'll hang the shelf tomorrow, if you don't mind. I don't want to ruin my neighbor's Saturday night. As you say, beloved, Mrs. Pooler lowered her eyes meekly. You will do it tomorrow. Maybe a tea with pretzels? Sunday Nick was awakened by the squeal of a drill. The husband hung a shelf in his daughter's room. Why did he start this hurdy-gurdy at such an early hour? Veronica stretched sweetly and glanced at her watch. It's already 11, how well I slept, and now I'll go and drink some coffee. Mrs. Pooler threw on a dressing gown, shoved her feet into fluffy slippers. The nasty sound behind the wall subsided. In the corridor, the woman heard her husband talking on the phone. I am happy, but only in the afternoon. Well, I need to deal with reporting, otherwise I will soon drown in papers. 1,600? Great. Well, kiss you, see you. Nike looked into her daughter's room with a smile. Good morning, are you off again? I'm going to work in just an hour, Veronica, you won't even get bored. I'll go and remove the tool, and for now you can admire the shelf. Mr. Pooler gently kissed his wife on the nose and left. As soon as her husband rattled his pieces of iron in the pantry, Veronica immediately grabbed his phone. As needed to be proved, Polly called Mr. Pooler a minute ago. Before my eyes everything swam like a fog. How is this possible? How so? When Mr. Pooler entered the room, Mrs. Pooler had already made up her mind. She will hunt down these traitors and catch them red-handed. Veronica is able to forgive a lot, but not betrayal and humiliation. She will tear out all the hair of her friend and divorce her husband. A picture of hopeless loneliness flashed before my eyes. The gray-haired old woman looks longingly after her beloved daughter, leaving for adulthood. Rave. One wave of Veronica's head forced his rich imagination to calm down. Nice shelf, my love. The sweetest of smiles played on her lips. Have you already had breakfast? At the appointed time, Veronica was already in full combat readiness. Faced with his wife in the hallway, Mr. Pooler was surprised. And where are you going? He asked as he buttoned up his jacket. To the store. Mrs. Pooler pulled out a gray inconspicuous down jacket from the closet and pulled a mouse-colored cap over her head. Shampoo is almost over and toothpaste too. At the entrance, Mr. Pooler offered to bring his wife. Are you kidding? 3 steps to the supermarket. The couple said goodbye and dispersed in different directions, hiding behind a pole. Veronica waited for her husband's car to leave the parking lot and ran to her old Mazda to follow her husband. It turned out to be not so easy. It was impossible to let his Toyota out of sight, but it was dangerous to stay too close. If Mr. Pooler accidentally notices his wife, then all the plans of the latter will collapse. God, what was I thinking when I chose a bright red car? Idiot. She put on some gray clothes and a cap, and she herself drives around the city in a wheelbarrow the color of a mad tomato. I would still put on makeup, glued a mustache. Mrs. Pooler almost betrayed herself when her husband's car stopped near the metro station. Red Mazda, frightened, darted into a free parking space. We didn't have to wait long. Literally a minute later, Polly fluttered out of the underpass in a new short fur coat and fashionable high-heeled boots. So that you break all your legs, the fairy of deceit, Nick wished from the bottom of her heart. Polly, apparently noticing Mr. Pooler, smiled. Flying Gate went to his car. The surveillance continued. Next stop, jewelry store. What, you don't like the earrings? Did mine not fit, or did the princess demand another piece of jewelry? Mrs. Pooler was trembling with impatience, waiting for the couple to leave the store. Finally, they appeared on the porch and walked together to Mr. Pooler in a Toyota. Polly was holding an open velvet box in her hands. She could not tear her eyes away from it. A friend can never fall in love. Failure overtook from an unexpected side. There were still 30 meters left before the traffic light at the crossroads, when suddenly a huge van appeared from somewhere in front of the bridge and blocked the entire view. When the green light came on, Veronica had no idea which way Mr. Pooler's car turned. Although the ex-husband of a friend took his little son to him for a few days, doves flew into an empty apartment. Nothing, you don't have long to coo, the winter days are short. When the red Mazda stopped at Polly's house, just opposite her windows, it was already dark. A bright light shone through the tightly drawn curtains. Blurry silhouettes swayed against the backdrop of the curtains. Dancing or something, feverish excitement disappeared somewhere. Veronica felt her tears flow. What to do in such a vile, humiliating situation? To break into an apartment and in one fell swoop turn a girlfriend into a mannequin and her husband into a eunuch? Or return home, put men's things in a suitcase and put them in the hallway? A pitiful attempt at dignity. Mrs. Pooler was not afraid to look like a scandalous woman. She would easily have defeated the entire cozy small apartment if she were not so scared. It's just scary and painful to see all this with my own eyes. The light went out in Polly's bedroom. Veronica didn't talk anymore. She jumped out of the car, flew up to the 4th floor, and started pounding furiously on the door. Nick, what happened? Polly looked at her friend in fear, holding the door with one hand, the other swinging open silk robe. Something with your daughter? Mrs. Pooler unceremoniously pushed Polly out of her way and went straight to the bedroom. Veronica, are you crazy? What's happening? Now you'll find out, the jealous woman promised ominously. She flung open the bedroom door and froze in place. An unfamiliar man was sitting on the bed in an unbuttoned shirt. It looks like the uncle was in a slight shock. What a nightmare, hello. Mrs. Pooler greeted him politely. Burning with shame, she slipped past Polly and hurried away from someone else's apartment. Already on the stairs, an angry voice struck my back. Stupid fool, why did you come then? Once in the car, Veronica cursed herself. Shame, my God, what a shame. But why didn't she even think that Toyota was not in the courtyard of the house? Let's say he went up with Liat Polly to her apartment. And where's the car? Did you put it in your pocket? So it's not Polly. In vain. She left her friend so quickly, it was necessary to ask. Why did she go to the jewelry store with Mr. Pooler? Is Polly really aware of all the tricks of her husband? At home, Mrs. Pooler, without undressing, burst into the living room and appeared before her husband's in all her glory, out of breath, sweating, in an old down jacket and an ugly hat. Oil painting, Mr. Pooler laughed. Where are you wandering, my love? I'm waiting. Well, how do you like all this? A subdued soft light burned in the room, beautiful music sounded softly, a bottle of her favorite wine, cheese, and fruit stood on a low table. God, what a fool she is. Nikki seemed to have a heavy weight lifted from her shoulders. She dropped her clothes on the floor and walked over to the table. Only this is a surprise. Yes, thank you, my dear. Mrs. Pooler grabbed the velvet case. What? Earrings in white gold with transparent sparkling stones. She's going crazy right now. These are different earrings, my wife blurted out gloomily. Of course, others, not grasping the meaning of her words, happily confirmed Mr. Pooler. Beautiful, Polly assured you that you will like them. And why is she here? Confused asked Mrs. Pooler. She chose them. Listen, that's the whole story. My husband perked up when we went to her grandmother's apartment. I said that I want to buy you some kind of jewelry, just like that. Polly remembered that you wanted earrings for a long time, so I bought them, so cute with emeralds. I wanted to give them to you on Saturday. Why didn't you give it? Sunshine, listen first. On Friday, when I would visit my parents, we boldly called each other. I sent her a photo of the earrings. She was so indignant. She stated that you hate yellow gold and colored stones. You think that they do not suit you. Well, we agreed that today we will go to the store together and change the decoration. Polly chose it herself, you see? How well everything turned out, just fine, Mrs. Pooler whispered. Tears welled up in my throat. These are the most beautiful earrings in the world, she kissed her husband. Dear, pour me some wine. Call Polly first. She was so worried about whether you like her choice or not. Calm down, my dear friend. It is unlikely that my beloved friend will want to listen to me now. Without thinking, Nick blurted out. Mr. Pooler carefully looked into her guilty face. Have you already done something? Tell me. Mrs. Pooler, blushing, confessed to her husband all the sins. To her amazement, Mr. Pooler didn't get angry. He looked at her with tenderness and sympathy. Silly, come here. The husband pulled Nick to him and kissed the top of his head. What a horror! Instead of just asking me about the earrings, you gave yourself 3 days of real hell, but was it hard to just ask? Oh, you, Othello in Bows, jealousy is a terrible thing, it burns a person to ashes. The monster with green eyes, Mrs. Pooler remembered, that's what the mother-in-law said correctly.